Okay. Morning. Today we're going to start.
Good morning.
Morning. We're going to start on Gimel Amud Beis. It's like in the middle of the page. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. I'm sorry, on Beis Amud Beis, on 2b. Beis Amud Beis. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. We thank Hashem that you're able to learn Torah every day. In the schus of our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. We're learning for Shleima, for father, and for Naftali ben Menuch Bela. Okay, so we're saying like this. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says the name of Shmuel. So did Rav Yehuda. Mishnah that we learned that says that if an individual relies on the Bezdin because the Bezdin made a mistake, so he's going to be exempt from bringing a karban. That's the opinion of Rav Yehuda, of Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel that this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, a different Rabbi, right? There's Rav and Rabbi. Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi. Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Yehuda Bar Yecheskel. It's once a Tana, once an Amira. The Amira is saying that this is the opinion of the Tana Rabbi Yehuda. But the sages say, Yochid Shasa Beiras Bezdin is Chayet. Sages say differently. They say that if an individual is relying on the Bezdin, since the Bezdin only brings a karban if the majority of the congregation sins, here it wasn't the majority of the congregation, it's only an individual that sins. So he's going to be chayav, the individual. In other words, no one is bringing a karban for him. So therefore he's going to have to bring the karban himself, even though he was relying on the Bezdin. My Rabbi Yehuda, where do you get that? Rabbi Yehuda has an opinion like this. The Tanya, because it was taught in a brisa. It says, Nefesh achas tachna b'shgaga ba'aseisa. If an individual sins by mistake, by doing, it says over here that there's three exclusions. One is nefesh, one is achas, and one is ba'aseisa. Real gimel miyutim. These are three exclusions. Now, what these three exclusions are actually excluding, one of them, Rashi brings this from the Maseches Shabbos. He brings that if a person has to do the whole malacha, not if he lifts up an object and someone else puts it down. You know, we're talking about carrying on Shabbos. That would be a malacha. If you lift it up, akira and hanacha, you have to lift it up, carry it over the domain line, and then put it down on the other side. If one person did the akira, the other person did the hanacha, then it's not you won't bring a sacrifice. Another one is if two people did the malacha together and each of them were able to do it on their own, so then that's called shnayim shasu and they're pater. And the third one is yachid shasa beiras bezdin. Ha'isim mipiatzme is chaya. Beiras bezdin is pater. The third one teaches me that if you rely on the bezdin, then you're pater. Okay? Now, it doesn't actually say in this brisa that it's Rabbi Yehuda. But the Gemara knows that it's Rabbi Yehuda, so it's good. My Rabbanon, what's the Rabbanon's opinion that say that if there's an individual that sins based on a mistaken psak from the Bezdin, that he still has to bring a karban? The Tanya was taught in a brisa, Dainani Aimer Miyat Kal Shechatu Chayavim. Now here, the way that this starts, they quoted us, but they start in the middle. Let me just tell you how it started. Rashi quoted the whole Teres Kainim somewhere. Just 1 second. I'm finding it now. Anyway, whatever the case is, it goes like this. That I could have thought
Vayikra, where it says Vayikra Dalet right there on the left, no?
Yeah, no, the Rashi quotes the Teres Kainim. before the Adayan Ani Yomer, there's another Adayan Ani Yomer. There was another case before that, just in the context. Forget the context, but I'm not seeing it right now. Oh, 1 second. It says over here. Now I found it. It's good when you give up. Then right when you give up, that's when you find. It starts off like this. Maybe if an individual does it, he should be chayev. If an individual commits a sin, should be chayev to bring a carbon. But if two people do it, they should be pater. Talmud Omer me'am haaretz. Says from the people of the earth. Even if a lot of people do it, it's not only if one person commits the sin. Even if more than one person commits the sin, they have to bring a carbon. But now, I would still say that when do we say that if an individual does a sin that he has to bring a carbon, that's only because it's an individual. However, Shane Beston, and why is that? Why would an individual have to bring a carbon? Because if he was we're talking about that he made a mistake and he committed a sin. What was the sin? He ate chalev. He mixed up the two fats of meat on the table. So I could have thought that he has to bring a carbon. I would say that he has to bring a carbon in this case, because let's say the Bezdin had paskin that chalev is mutter. Forbidden fat is permissible. Who would have to bring the carbon? Not the Bezdin. So that's why he has to bring the carbon. She'in Bezdin maybe al yedei par. That's if a minority of the congregation committed the sin. Roiv kal shachata yupturim. But I would have thought that if the majority of the congregation altogether mixed up their fat on the table, everyone, like 51% of the Jewish community had non-kosher fat on their table and with kosher fat, and they all mistakenly mixed them up. So I could have thought that maybe they should be exempt. Why? Because if that would have been a mistake of the Bezdin, not a mistake of a confusion of which one it is in their refrigerator and on the table, a Bezdin mistake that they thought that maybe it's permissible, then because Sharei Bezdin may be a Mal Yidei Empire, because Bezdin could bring for them the bull, the carbon. So maybe in a case where the Bezdin could bring the carbon, maybe they don't have to bring the carbon. Talmud Omer me'am haaretz. It says from the people of the earth, and afilu ruba afilu kula. That means even if the majority of the people made this mistake, even if the entire congregation made the mistake, you still have to bring the carbon. Follow? You get what just happened there? We didn't. Well, let me tell you what we're looking for, and then we're looking for an opinion that says that if the individual relies on the Bezdin, he has to bring a carbon. Not like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says if the individual relied on the Bezdin, he's pater. Right. We said that the Rabbanan hold that if individual relies on the Bezdin, he's chayav. In order to get to this, we quoted this case that said that if a minority of the congregation makes a mistake, not because of the Bezdin. So over there, I would say that you're chayav, because if the Bezdin if it would have been a mistake of the Bezdin, then you would still be chayav. That's why you're chayav now. But if the majority of the congregation would make the mistake, which means that if it would have been a mistake because of the Bezdin, then I could have thought that maybe you should be pater. Nevertheless, you're still chayav, because it wasn't a mistake of the Bezdin, it was your own personal mistake. Now, what's the case that we're talking about over here that he's making a mistake? Are we talking about the mistake that they're making is that there's a mistake of which piece of meat it is? What do you mean in between?
Scenario, okay. Like, in order for the person to be exempt, it has to be like a majority. What about like the beginning, like before it was no?
Umar's going to get into that sort of, but until it's a majority, each individual is chayav. They have to count up how many people sin. So, and when they're done, if it's more than the amount, but they will only know when the Bezdin realizes that it's a mistake. At that point, then it's over. Bezdin made a psak. Follow it like this. The Bezdin made a psak. You're allowed to eat chaylev. They're not counting how many people eat chaylev yet because it's insignificant. So it's kosher. Not counting how many. Then the Bezdin says, "Oi, we made a mistake. You're not allowed to eat this type of chaylev. This is actually forbidden." They say, "Okay, how many people did it?" So now they have to go back and count. Put an ad, and everyone, click here if you ate chaylev. And then we get the numbers in, and that's it.
It's time. Not everyone's.
It doesn't matter if it takes time. So it takes time. So they get all the numbers, and then they have to bring the carbon. Now, who brings the carbon? Well, it depends. If it's the majority of the congregation, then the bezdin or the congregation brings on behalf of everyone. But if it's less than the majority, then it would assume that then there would be a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon if the individual has to bring, or if the individual is exempt. Rabbi Yehuda's view, the individual is exempt because he was relying on the bezdin. While they're counting, there's a possibility that maybe there's Nashim Tali, but I don't think so. I think they just wait. How long do you think the counting takes?
How
2 days?
people.
2 to 3 days?
And the city, how big it is.
Well, they put in people in each city to count how many people there. And they collect the numbers. Okay. So, B'mai, what was the case that there was a sin here? Ilim b'shigas ma'isa. The reading of this Gemara is one of the most difficult readings because it elaborates much more than what you would expect the Gemara to elaborate. So you don't really know where to stop. It's usually the Gemara is much more terse, and over here it's like just verbose. Okay. Ilim b'shigas ma'isa. Are we talking about there was a mistake in action? That means that you mixed up 2 types of fat on the table and you ate the wrong one. The bezdin shlei bahira, and we're talking about the bezdin didn't paskin. So bezdin ma'avidatayah. So why are we mixing the bezdin into this? It has nothing to do with the bezdin. Shlei bahira's bezdin. If it's without a ruling of the bezdin mimaisi shlei bahira, would the bezdin have to bring a sacrifice when they never even paskined anything? Ella bahira must be we're talking about that there was a psak of the bezdin. But how could you say it's talking about a psak of the bezdin when you're quoting a pasuk that talks about only when there's a mistake of an individual because he mixed things up? Ella lav hachikama. Rather, it must mean the following: Miyut kal shechata b'shigas ma'isa chayavim. If a minority of the congregation sinned because they mixed things up, they were confused which fat was which. That if Bezdin would have paskined about that fat, the Bezdin would still not have to bring a sacrifice because it's only a minority, it's not a majority. Bezdin only brings if they cause the majority of the congregation to sin. And here, even if they would have paskined, and that's the cause of this mistake, they still wouldn't have brought the sacrifice because it's only a minority. But the individuals themselves, now those 3 words, Hain Chayavin, are the key point of this whole Gemara. That's all we have to know. Yeah. But the individuals themselves, they would be Chayav. That's the main point. Which means that we now have the opinion of the Rabbanon that say that when individuals make a mistake relying on the Bezdin doesn't have to bring the sacrifice because it's not a majority, but the individuals themselves still have to bring the sacrifice. Contrary to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that if they rely on the bezdin, then they're pater. And here the opinion is that they're chay. Now Yachal, I wasn't supposed to get distracted by that because we're in the middle of a sentence here. Yachal Rav Tzibur Shasa B'Shigas Ma'isi B'Tar. Maybe the same thing should happen if it's the majority of the congregation that sinned by mistake, not because of the bezdin, but the Shigas Ma'isa. They confused for some reason. Everyone in the whole city mixed up in the whole Israel, mixed up all their meats. the fats, the kosher fat with non-kosher fat. Maybe they should be pater. Because if this would have been a psak from the Bezdin, and that's why they mixed it up, then the Bezdin would take over and bring the sacrifice, and the individuals wouldn't, and not the individuals, and the congregation wouldn't. It says, and the people of the earth, afilu rubai, which means that if it's a mistake of action, not a mistake in psak, then they have to bring the sacrifice themselves. Okay. But what we just got out of this was those three words, Hahin Chayavan, that if it was a psak from the Bezdin, the individuals still have to bring because it's not the majority of the congregation. And that's the opinion of the Rabban. Amar of Papa, or Papa says, Mimai. How do you know that's the opinion of the Rabban? And how do you know that? How do you know Hahin Chayavan? How do you know that the individuals themselves, which means the minority, would have to bring the sacrifice? Maybe it actually fits with the other opinion that we quoted, that if the Bezdin made a psak, and then they realized they made a mistake, and people followed that psak, and now the people are upset. The Bezdin made a mistake. They have to bring an atonement. So they go to the Bezdin. The Bezdin says, "We don't have to bring an atonement. It wasn't the majority of the congregation. So you bring the atonement." The people say, "We don't have to bring atonement either. We relied on you." So maybe we're totally exempt, which was that other opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Well, who's to say that over here we're talking about that the individuals themselves also have to bring that the individuals have to bring the atonement when the Bezdin made a mistake? Gemara explains like this: Ihachi, if that's what's going on over here, where the individuals don't have to bring, and the Bezdin also doesn't have to bring, why did the Brisa go on and say like this? If the individuals made a mistake, I could have thought that maybe if the individual, if the minority sinned because of a mistake, then I could have said that it's a minority. And if the Bezdin themselves, if it would have been a mistake because of the Bezdin, then the Bezdin would not have to bring the sacrifice, and the individuals themselves would also not have to bring the sacrifice. Wow. If it would have been a mistake. I could have, right? That's what we're suggesting now. Yeah. The individuals themselves also wouldn't. So if that's the case, the Gemara is saying, then why does the Brisa go on and say that, but if it's the majority, then the Bezdin would cover it? The reason why we're moving on to the next case by saying that if it's the majority is because if it's the minority, then we would say that they're chayiv. In the majority, we would say that they're pater. That's why we moved on. But if by the minority they're also pater, then why we move on? We could have stuck to the first case and said that you're chayiv if you make a mistake. Contrary to if the Bezdin made the mistake where you would be pater. Why do we have to move on to say contrary to the majority where you would be pater? If you would be pater on your own, if it was the Bezdin's mistake, elalav mitlay mahader al miyut the mechayim b'shigas ma'isa, u'b'seif mahadar ruba l'chiyuv b'shigas ma'isa. The fact that we didn't do this, that we didn't stick to the case of the minority, and we jumped to the case of the majority to show that contrast of a chiyuv and a pater. So shmamina miyut bara chayavan ein kispa l'seira. Shlei bayra b'shigas ma'isa chayavan. Okay. Coming to teach me that there is this opinion of the Rabbanan, this opinion that say that if it's a minority that made a mistake based on a psak of the Bezdin, that the minority actually has to bring the sacrifice as if they made a regular mistake, a regular shegig, and they have to bring a carbon chatas. Okay. The Gemara says, Michti, 1 second. Tarvayu sas mitanan. We have two Mishnayos over here, or Brisas that you just quoted, and both of them don't have any names in them. How do you know the first opinion is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? That opinion that says that we learn from a diak of the Mishnah, a diak of the pasuk. Mishnah learns a diak in the pasuk that says that if it's relying on the bezdin that you're going to be exempt. How do you know that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe that's the Rabbanon's opinion. The Gemara says, "Man shamat le'dedarsh mutikei gavna." Well, who do we know that would darshan similar to the way Rabbi Yehuda, similar to the way that Brisa just darshaned? Who darshans like that? It's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda does that. He does that type of thing. That's typical Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya was taught in a Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Zayis terasa oila, hi ha'oila." Right? This is the law of the oila. It is the oila. Now it says, "Harei shleishim miyutim." These are three exclusions. And if you look at this brisa, right on the last three words of the base of 2b, it says Rabbi Yehuda Aimer. It says Rabbi Yehuda says. And it's exactly that same expression, Harei elu shleishim miyutim, which is the expression of the brisa that we quoted, Harei elu gimel miyutim. You see, that's a language that Rabbi Yehuda uses. That's a style of drasha Rabbi Yehuda does. Now, what do we actually learn from that? When it says Zayis teres ha'oila, this is the law of the burnt offering. One is coming to exclude that if it was shechted by night, you don't leave it on the altar. You don't take it up on the altar. Another one is if all the blood was spilled out before it was offered, that you don't bring it on the altar. Another one is if the blood left the courtyard or the curtains, mishkan, that you don't bring it up on the altar. So in other words, a lot of times there's a sacrifice that became invalid, but once it's brought on the altar, you leave it there. These are three exceptions to that, where even if it was brought up, you bring it down from the altar. Okay. So we just had now a proof that it's Rabbi Yehuda. We could say Rabbi Yehuda. You can't say it's Rabbi Yehuda. It says that if the majority of the congregation sinned, then the bezdin brings the sacrifice. That's what we learned in that brisa that we had before. So bezdin would bring the bull offering, the sacrifice. Be Rabbi Yehuda, and if it would be Rabbi Yehuda, there's a machlekes here. Who brings the sacrifice when the majority of the congregation sinned? Would be, if it's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, he holds that not that the bezdin brings the sacrifice, but that the congregation brings the sacrifice. Tzibur Hudamaisi. Bezdin loy. The bezdin doesn't bring the sacrifice. Ditanan, as it was taught in the Mishnah. It's coming up shortly. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Shiva Shvatim Shachatu, Evim Zayim Parim. There's 12 tribes. If 7 out of the 12 sin, so then the 7 have to bring each one of those 7 has to bring a bull offering as a sacrifice, which means that it's not the best, and it's the people. So that brisa can't be Rabbi Yehuda. Reb Nachman Amar Shmuel Zu Divrei Reb Meir. Reb Nachman says it's the opinion of Reb Meir. You see, before it was Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel that said that it's Rabbi Yehuda. Now we have Reb Nachman in the name of Shmuel that says that it's not Rabbi Yehuda, it's Reb Meir. Rather, but the Chachamim would say that if individuals sin based on a psach of the bezdin, then instead of saying that he's exempt because he was relying on the bezdin, he would say that he's actually chayiv. My Reb Meir, my Rabbanon, where's this Reb Meir, where's this Rabbanon? We're going to do the same thing that we did before. We're looking for the source of these opinions that we just heard from Reb Nachman in the name of Shmuel. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. Hayru v'yasu. If they paskin, and then they did. Now, there's a pronoun there. I know when it says they paskin, I know it's referring to the bezdin. When it says they did, I don't know who the they is. So whatever the case is, Reb Meir Paiter, Reb Meir says it's exempt. The Chachamim Mechayivim, the Chacham say that they're chayiv. Man asu, who's the one that actually did this? Ilema bezdin. If it's the Bezdin that paskined wrong, and then they acted on that. So my time of the Rabbanan the Mechayev. Why did the Rabbanan say that they're Chayev? But Tani Yachal Her Bezdin Va'asu Bezdin Yachal Yochayev and Tamle Makol. When would they be Chayev to bring this bull offering? That's only if the congregation sinned, not if just the Bezdin sinned. Talmud Leimer Hakol Va'asu Maisa Tali Bakol. Maisa, I'm sorry, Hakol Va'asu. Maisa Tali Bakol. The action is the dependent on the people. V'hira Tali Bezdin. But when it comes to the psak, that's dependent on the Bezdin. So it doesn't have to do with the Bezdin sinning in order to bring this sacrifice. Ella Hira Bezdin V'asarei Bakol. It must mean that the Bezdin paskin, and who was the Va'asu who sinned? That was the majority of the congregation. So my time they're Meir, they're Paiter. So why does Rav Meir say that they're exempt? This is exactly the case where the Bezdin is Chayev. Elalav Hira Bezdin V'asamiyat called. It must mean that the Bezdin paskin, but it wasn't the majority of the congregation. It was the minority of the congregation. And now we have a machlaikas. So b'hakamiflagi, and this is the machlaikas. Mar savar yachid shasa beiras Bezdin pater. The first opinion, which is Reb Meir, he says that if individual relies on the Bezdin, and which was a mistaken psak, the Bezdin doesn't have to bring, but he also doesn't have to bring because he relied on the Bezdin. Marsav Yachid Shasar Rabbas Bezdin Chayiv. Other opinion holds the opinion of the Rabbanan, the Chachamim. They say that if an individual relies on the Bezdin, since it's not the majority of the congregation, he has to bring his own atonement. Chayiv. Okay, so we have the source of a machlekes, and that would be Reb Meir and the Chachamim, and our Mishnah would be the opinion of Reb Meir. There's two ways of looking at it. That you get an atonement, you're able to get an atonement, by bringing it. Amar of Papa says, the Kuli Alma Yachid Shasa Beiras Bezdin Pater. Actually, everyone holds that if everyone, Reb Meir and the Chachamim, in this case, they hold that if an individual acts based on the psak of the Bezdin, that the individual is actually exempt. So why over here is there machlekes? We have a different story going on here. We have, it's 50-50. So half the congregation sinned, half didn't sin. And now we have to look at the Bezdin to count up the last numbers to see if we can use them for one of the sides of here. Will the Bezdin make the majority of the congregation? This one opinion holds that the Bezdin will complete to the tzibur, and therefore, the Hill says it sounds like the elections.
Yeah.
So, the other opinion says that the Bezdin won't complete. Now, what does it mean that they'll complete? So Reb Meir says that the congregation's pater, because the Bezdin will bring the sacrifice, which means that the Bezdin is counted as part of the congregation that's in, and they'll be able to bring the sacrifice. Another opinion, the Chacham say that the Bezdin does not complete the number; they don't combine, and so therefore the Bezdin won't bring the sacrifice, and then the individuals will be exempt. But the idea here is that the Bezdin will be exempt because it won't be a majority. That's what the Chum mean. One second. The Chum say that Bezdin is chayev. Chachamim say chayev. It's a problem with this Rashi.
There's different opinions about whether it should count. And the rabbi
If there's no, so that's the machlekes. Are the rabbis counted or not? Right. That's why there's two opinions. There's a slight problem here. Because where Meir says pater and the Chum say chayev, right? Now that's a machlekes. We're going to count the bezdin as part of it. Now, if we count the bezdin as part of it, then pater would mean that the bezdin is pater, and chayev would mean that the bezdin is chayev. So who holds that we count the bezdin as part of the tzibur? That would have to be Chachamim. Rashi says that it's Reb Meir. Let me just see. See how they read this. Okay. So the way he learns it. Mar Savar, the Chachamim hold that the Bezdin completes and therefore the Bezdin is Chayev. Meir would hold that he's Pater because the Bezdin won't complete it. So it's only considered a minority. Now, what did Rashi mean? Reb Meir Pater Sibor the Karmaisi Bezdin. I mean, like, come on. It must be the Rashi must be talking about the. It must be on a different piece here. Let me see what that year is. Oh, Ayin Marsha. All right, I'm not going to look it up now. Iba Yisema. Yeah. Iba Yisema, another pshat. If you want, you could say Hayru Bezdin Vasu Rubai Shalkal. If the Bezdin Paskin, and who sinned? Who's the Vasu? They sinned. Who's the they? It's the majority of the congregation. Now, Reb Meir says that they're exempt. How could they be exempt? The Bezdin should be Chayev. Man Chachamim Reb Shimoni. So who's the Chacham? It's Reb Shimon. Damer Tzibur Maisi, who Bezdin Maisi. The Reb Shimon says that the Tzibur. Oh, this is the Rashi Tzibur Maisi. Reb Meir's. Who's the Pater? Pater means that the congregation is Pater because the Bezdin is already bringing the sacrifice. And Reb Shimon, who's the Chachamim, say that both have to bring the sacrifice. Both the congregation has to bring a bull offering, and also the Bezdin has to bring a bull offering. Iba Yisema, if you want, we can learn this brisa. Damar Iba Yisema Shevet She'asa Beiras Bezdin. It's talking about that it was a tribe that did it, that committed the sin. Man Chachamim, and who are the sages that say Chayev? That's Rabbi Yehuda. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Tanya was started on a brisa Shevet She'asa Beiras Bezdin. Isa Shevet Chayev. That's considered a kahal. That's considered a congregation, even if it's only one tribe. You have 12 of those, and even every single one of them is considered a congregation. And we were thinking that you need the majority of Israel. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that you only need the one tribe to sin. Doesn't say. Doesn't say that. Biba Yisema. If you want, we could say kan shachatu shisha vehin ruba shalkal. Shiva alpha pishin ruba shalkal. You have another way of looking at this. If the majority of the tribe sinned, but that doesn't mean it's the majority of Israel. Those were all the smaller tribes. The majority of Israel is in the bigger tribes. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's the majority of Israel, but it's not the majority of the tribes. That's sin. Masdisin Mani, and who would the Mishnah be? Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Opinion of Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Now we're going back probably to our Mishnah now, right? No, when it says Masdisin Mani, we're talking about the brisa. Masdisin Mani. And who would be the author of the brisa? would be like the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Elazar. The Chachamim that say that the Chayev is the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Elazar. The Tanya Reb Shimon ben Elazar Eimer Mishmai. Shimon ben Elazar says in the name of his teacher Reb Meir. It's interesting that we have this because the Rambam doesn't say that Reb Shimon ben Elazar is a Talmud of Reb Meir, but we have from other sources that Reb Shimon ben Elazar is a Talmud of Reb Meir. Here we have Reb Shimon ben Elazar saying in the name of Reb Meir, Chatu Shisha. If 6 of the tribes sin, and they're the majority of the congregation, Shiva, or if 7 sin, even if they're not the majority of the congregation, chayav, and they're going to be chayav, because they say, he says differently than the way we quoted Reb Meir. That's the way we quoted the Chachamim is the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Elazar in the name of Reb Meir. Amar Rabasi, Ubahira Holach Acharei v'Yeshvei Eretz Yisrael. When Bezdin paskined and people violated the law based on the mistaken psak of the Bezdin, he says that you have to look at the majority of the people that are in Israel, not the majority of the Jewish people all over the world. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, Bayash Shleima Beisa Yesachag, Chol Yisraelim Kal Gadol Milavai Chamas Ad Nachal Mitzrayim Lefnei Hashem Elokeinu Shivas Yamim Abbas Yom. In the chapter that talks about the inauguration of the temple that King Solomon made, said that he made a celebration for 7 days plus another 7 days. It actually interfered with Yom Kippur, and that year they didn't fast on Yom Kippur. They had a special understanding of the psukim that when they're doing this inauguration, they skip Yom Kippur. Anyway, there was a celebration for 7 days, and 7 days, a total of 14 days. And it says that all of Israel came there, Kahal Gadol. It was a great congregation from Hamas, the Lavai Hamas, I guess it means the entrance of Hamas, until the river of Egypt. Now, Michti, it says like this. Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, Kol Yisrael Makal Gadol. It says that all of Israel was with him, the great congregation. Why does it have to say from Lavi Chamas until Nachal Mitzrayim? Shema Mina, it's coming to teach me, Hani hu dikri kol, that only these are called the congregation. Aval Hanach leikri kol, but those people from Nachal Mitzrayim, from Chamas till Nachal Mitzrayim, are not called Kahal. No, I didn't learn it right. What it means is the borders of Israel are Hamas till Nachal Mitzrayim, but outside those borders is not called Kal. Those are the borders. Where is Hamas? Is it in the north? Nachal Mitzrayim would be in the south. And what does it say over there?
Northern border city.
Northern border, okay. Perfect. Okay. Mamina, see from here, like the way Rabasi said that it needs to be in Israel itself to have these numbers.
We wouldn't be counted.
We wouldn't be counted. Okay. Gemara starts off like this. Pshita, the following is obvious. Usually when it says Pshita, it's about to tell me something that's not so Pshita. It says, starts out with, this is obvious, but you just wait and I'll tell you something that we don't know. Merubin v'nismayatu. Let's say the people that sinned, that listened to the Bezdin and they ate that food that the Bezdin said was kosher, turns out it wasn't kosher. They ate it, and it turns out it's the majority of the congregation. However, many of those people died. Cholesterol. And now when you do the numbers, turns out when it comes time to bring the sacrifice, turns out that it's not the majority anymore. It's a minority. It says Hainu plukta the Reb Shimon v'Rabbanan. This would be a machlekes between Reb Shimon and the Rabbanan. Now, Reb Shimon is coming up later when there's a king or a kohen gadol that sins, they bring a different sacrifice than if an individual sins. The question over there was, in that Mishnah, was let's say a person sinned, and before he had a chance to bring the sacrifice, he was appointed as a king or appointed as a kohen gadol. So does he bring the sacrifice as an individual, like that old sacrifice when he sinned, or do we look at it as he was right now bringing the sacrifice? Do we go after the time of the sin, or do we go after the time of his awareness of the sin and his obligation to bring the sacrifice? So that's a machlekes, and we want to say that same machlekes would apply over here, because when the situation changes, how do we view it? But let's say it starts off where there is no obligation to bring the sacrifice, because you know who sinned? It was just a minority of people that sinned. And v'nisrabu, but it became many. How did it become many? Because a bunch of people that didn't sin, they died. So now it turns into the majority of the congregation, because all the people that didn't sin died. They didn't listen to the rabbis, right?
It's tricky.
They didn't eat their cod liver oil or whatever fat they were supposed to be having. So, mi pligi Reb Shimon v'Rabbanan. Is this also considered machlekes Reb Shimon and Rabbanan when the situation changes, like we said before, by the kohen gadol or the melech? Reb Shimon does l'basa yediyah. Reb Shimon says that you go after at the time of awareness. That's the way you bring the sacrifice. We'd say that yechayev, because over here now it's the majority of the people that sinned, because at the time of the awareness. Rabbanan da asli basar chatas patri. And the Rabbanan that say you don't go after the time of the awareness, you go after the time of the sin. They would say that you're exempt. Or maybe not. Gemara says, "My, what's going to be the din?" Tisbara, do you really think that this could be a machlekes Reb Shimon and the Rabbanan? Eimad deshamat ila Reb Shimon das alaf basa yediyah echad avidiyah v'chata b'chiyav yediyah d'loy chata min shamet le. Reb Shimon says that there's an option of how to view this scenario. Do we view it as the later situation or as the earlier situation? That's only when there was the sin was committed that would obligate a sacrifice. But over here, at the time of the sin, there was no obligation of a sacrifice because it was the minority. Bimkein leisi kiashta. I mean, bimkein leisi kiashta. If Reb Shimon would say that you go after the time of awareness, even if it would be entirely exempt at the time of the sin, so then if he becomes a king or he becomes a kohen gadol, you should only view as it is now.
One is about one person.
Yeah, but we're looking at this change in scenario. What did Reb Shimon hold before? Reb Shimon, if you view it as a time of the sin, or do what was Reb Shimon's view? That was the other one. So go to Daf Yud. You turn to page 10. So Shimon holds over here. If they knew about it before they were appointed, Shimon holds that you need both. Oh, that's what it is. If the situation changes, but you didn't know about it till afterwards, then you're not going to have to bring any carbon. You need to have both things. You need to have the sin and the awareness at the same scenario, same situation. Okay, so if that's the case, if Reb Shimon doesn't need the sin at all, then we would say that he'd be chayiv even if he only knew later on that he sinned.
Oh.
And that's not so. That's not the case. Reb Shimon chatavi diabai. Rather, Reb Shimon holds that you need both. You need the sin and the awareness in the same situation in order to be chayiv. The Gemara now has Yeshiva has a question. The best in Paskin that forbidden fat is permissible. Also miyatakal. And the minority of the congregation said, yeah, this is great. Let's go eat it. The Besdin then retracted, says we made a mistake.
Oh.
And then they paskin again. Also miyatacher. And another minority, they said, oh no, we made a mistake. And then they said that it's permissible. So now, if you combine the two minorities, you're going to have a majority. Do we say that this is two awarenesses? Because after the first one, they knew that it was a mistake. And then when they made the mistake again, that's a new mistake. It's a lame star if you can't combine them. But the fact is, both of them are the same prohibited fad. Mitzdarif, we should combine it. And if you want, it would enter your mind to say, given the idi v'idi chelavu mitzdarif, that we're going to combine them because they're both fat. Miyut b'chelav shel gabei keva, miyut b'chelav shel gabei adakin. Let's say there's two areas of fat. The first one ate the fat that was on the stomach, and the other one ate the fat that was on the intestines. There's two different types of fat. Both of them are chelav. But the Besdin made a mistake about the first one, and then they retracted. Then a mistake about the second one. And now we have minority of each, but combined together it's a majority. What's going to be the din now? The betray cry, if you look at the verses in the Torah, it say that was a mistake in two different verses, so we can't combine them. But the fact is, it's both under the same prohibition of chelav. It would combine. Let's say we'll say that it's all considered one type of forbidden fat, and it combines. But let's say half the people made a mistake about forbidden fat, and half the people made the mistake about the blood, the type of blood that the Besdin said was permissible. Over here, maybe we could say that since it's definitely we could say since it's two prohibitions, so you can't combine them. Perhaps we could say that I should probably take out those words. Yeah. Kivan, the karban and shava, since they have the same sacrifice, mitzdarif. I know it's not the same prohibition, but the same punishment. Rimtim tleimer kivan the karban and shava mitzdarif. If it would enter your mind to say that we're going to follow that view, that since the sacrifice is the same, we're going to say that the Besdin now has to bring the sacrifice because we're going to combine the two minorities and to make the majority. Let's say half of the people, one minority ate chelav, another minority ate worshipped idols. This is not a similar sin. They don't have a similar sacrifice. But maybe the fact is that if it's done in a way when they don't have to bring a sacrifice, because it's kares, right? It's an excision. If it was done b'mezid, right? So then that is the same. So the Gemara says, "Teku." We leave this as a question. Now, of course, we have a question. When you said teku, is it a teku on all of them, or is it a teku just on the last one? Which one is the teku? We just had so many imtim taleimas. If you say this, if you say that, teku is all, or teku is just the last one. I bet that's a machlekes.
Self, right.
Teku is a teku on that too. Okay. Ibailo. Let's see what he says over here. What the teku's on. Who's that? This is a Maseches Gemara. The Gemara, they don't explain. They just say teku. Oh, Shaila Zu. This question. They didn't say Shailas Elu. It's Shaila Zu. The last one is the teku. All the imtim telemar seem to have been answered. That's what it seems according to that.
Whether it's not shkaga achas or not.
Right. Ibaylu, they have another question. Hayru bezdin shechelav mutter v'asamiyat akal meisa isi bezdin. Bezdin paskin that you're allowed to eat chelav, and the minority of the congregation sinned and ate the chelav. Amad bezdin acher, another bezdin got up v'chazru v'hayru v'asamiyat acher, and another bezdin got up and paskin, and then another minority ate the forbidden fat. According to the opinion that says that the Bezdin is the one that needs to bring the sacrifice, the lesno. Then over here there's no question because the Bezdin isn't even here to bring the sacrifice. They passed away. The question would be according to the opinion that says that the congregation needs to bring the sacrifice. What would be the din? Tzibur Hakai, the Tzibur, the congregation is here. Or maybe we need the awareness of the Bezdin and Paskin, and they're not here, they passed away. Okay, Teku, leave this as a question as well. Amar Rabbi Yonasan, Rabbi Yonasan says, Meya sheyashvu l'hayros ein chayav man adshir kulam. Nemar kol adas Yisrael yishku ad yishku kulam. Shetif shayt hayra b'chol adas Yisrael. This is, Dr. Stein was mentioning this before. Rabbi Yonasan is saying that if there's 100 people in the court that they sat to paskin, they all have to paskin. It has to be unanimous. It can't be, in order for this halacha to play out, where the Bezdin is going to have to bring the sacrifice when the people sin, it's only when it's a unanimous decision, not if it's based on a majority. Amar Rav Huna Breder Rav Hoshea, and Mistabra, makes sense to say this. Because normally in the Torah we always say that the majority is like everything. But here it says all the congregation, all of the congregation. Even if it's 100 judges there, sometimes they add judges. So then they all have to paskin the same. Tanan. We learned in the Mishnah. Hayru Bezdin v'yadachem shato ish talmid v'rei leira v'halach vasal piyam vein sha'asu v'asima vein sha'asu v'asarchem vein sh'layasu v'asar is a chayv nishlei talab bezdin. Hayu d'chayv ha'chapater. Where it says 1 second. According to Rabbi Yonasan, we have a major problem. This was Dr. Stein's question before. He said if you need everyone to paskin. So we said in the Mishnah that if there's one individual that knows that the Bezdin made a mistake, and he's part of the Bezdin, and he actually ends up sinning on what he knows is not correct, but he relied on the Bezdin, which made a mistake, and he knew that they were wrong. So it says that he is going to be chayev because he wasn't really relying on the Bezdin. He can't say that he was relying on the Bezdin because he knew the Bezdin was wrong. He would just committed the sin. The question is, we asked before, so why does he have to bring a karban? He's amazed. So we said that he was thinking that maybe you're supposed to listen to the Bezdin even if they're wrong. That was his. Well, the question now is that why should we say that he should be chayev, but other people that do that sin should be exempt? 1 second, it's not unanimous. One individual there that didn't go along with the Bezdin. Good question. So, wasn't a unanimous decision. The Gemara says, he nodded with his head. Means he accepted their psak, even though he didn't agree with it. He knew that they're wrong, but he still nodded. Tashema, come and listen. If the best in Paskin and one individual knew that it was a mistake, and he tells them, you're mistaken. Then then they're going to be exempt from bringing the sacrifice. What's the reason why they're going to be exempt? Because it's not unanimous, because there was one individual that messed it up. He told them that they're mistaken. Hashasik mistake. But let's say he would be have been silent, then chayavim. Then they would be chayav. But he didn't paskin. He didn't say anything. Amri Hachinami over here as well. Maybe he didn't say anything, but he still nodded his head. That means that everyone agreed, and it was a unanimous psak. Yeah.
Abstains. It's like being abstaining.
Yeah, if he abstains, that would be different. If we're talking about that, he didn't abstain. He passed.
He agreed with
He
him.
agreed. That could be abstaining. Sorry. And then you would need another judge to fill that in. If it would, that's cases of 71 or something. One count. We need another two judges. So here we're talking about where he nodded.
So why do you do that? He knows in his heart that's one thing, and then he doesn't act on
He's
it.
not in tune with his understanding. Peer pressure. Massive Mashashi. Mashashi has a question. Samchu Rabbi Seinu al Dibra Rabbi Shimon Gamliel al Dibra Rabbi Lasan Rabbi Sadik Shayimram in Geisen Gezel al Tzirel and Kim Levi Tzibachel Lamidba. Masharshi's questions like this. It says that the sages relied on the words of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and on the words of Rabbi Lasan Rabbi Sadik that said that we never make a decree on the community if the community can't handle it. Amar Rabbi Barabba says, Micro, what's the source for this? In curse, you would be cursed. And for me, you steal. The entire congregation. Which means that if everyone in the congregation is sinning, then there's a curse. Over here it says the entire congregation, and we know that the majority is what matters. It doesn't need to be the entire congregation. Tiyufta de Rabbi Yonasan Tiyufta. There's a big, strong question on Rabbi Yonasan that says that we can't use the majority, it needs to be unanimous. Well, I might call Adas the Kamarachmana. So why does it say Rabbi Yonasan was quoting to us, Kol Adas Yisrael, the entire congregation? What does it mean entire if you're telling me now it just needs to be the majority? It says, you don't need to have everyone agreeing. You only need to have the majority agreeing, but you need to have all of them there. Yeah, they all have to be there, all 71 judges. And then it's considered a psak. Amar Rabbi Yeshua, Yud Sheyeshrim Bedin, when 10 people are sitting in judgment, Koilar Taloi Betzavar Kulam. There's a collar, means like a punishment, like a imprisonment, a collar, like a brain. What do they call it? A bracelet that they put on the ankle.
Ankle,
Ankle bracelet. So this is a collar is a collar. There's the entire Bezdin is could be in big trouble. Shita, the Gemara is obvious. The Gemara says no. The fil Talmud b'fnei Rabbi. It's coming to include that even the student in front of the teacher, if he doesn't speak up, then he also has the collar on him.
Whoa.
Rav Huna ki avinafik lebeidina ma'aseh asara tanai the beirav lekamei kihechi the nemtayin shiva mikashura. When Rav Huna would make a psak, would go to Bezdin, he would bring 10 students from the yeshiva with him, so that if he should be in trouble, the trouble should only be like a splinter out of a beam. In other words, let's divide the punishment amongst us. He doesn't want it all to fall on his head. Rav Ashi kavi ma'isi tarfa lekamei, and they would bring an animal that may not be kosher in front of him. He would have to paskin some ma'isi asara tabchim mimasa machsia. Ma'isa kami would bring 10 butchers from the city of Machsia in front of him. Mamar keichad dinimtayin shiva k'mikshura said, I would like to be only punished like a splinter in the beam, and we'll spread out the what's it called?
Punishment.
The responsibility.
Responsibility.
Yeah. What was the other one?
That is-
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, new Mishnah.
Is that what a kangaroo court is? No, in the sense that they bring these 10 guys to their students. They're supposed to agree with him or disagree with him if he's wrong.
He's hoping that they'll disagree, and they'll speak up if there's a problem. But if not, then they'll spread out the responsibility.
It's useless. They're gonna stay quiet.
Right. Pedro Bezdin biyadu shato. Bezdin made a psak, and they knew that they made a mistake. So they retracted. Bein shehevi kaparasan, bein shlehevi kaparasan. Whether they brought their atonement or they didn't bring their atonement, the halach v'asal piyam. And someone went and he paskined. Reb Shimon, fighter. Reb Shimon says he's exempt. Why is he exempt? Because he was relying on the Bezdin. Now the problem is over here that the Bezdin already announced that they made a mistake. This individual didn't know about it. Rabbi Lezer Emer Safek. Rabbi Lezer says, 1 second. This is not so clear. This is a question. It's a doubt. After the Bezdin already said that they made a mistake, and he's continuing to do that, it's a doubt if he has to bring. It's a doubt about his status, and therefore he would bring an asham tali, which is the sacrifice which is brought when someone sinned and when it was a doubt. Ezel Safek. What's considered a doubt? Yashav le b'tech beis. If he's sitting at home, so then he's going to be chayiv because he should have known that the Bezdin retracted. Sitting at home, he probably went to the mikveh and he hears all the gossip. So he should have known. But let's say he traveled to a faraway country,
Right.
and over there he didn't have all the news. So then Pater is going to be exempt because he was relying on the Bezdin. Rabbi Akiva says, Akiva says, I agree. I agree with this, that if the person went on a trip, that he's more exempt than obligated. Because how was he to know that the Bezdin retracted? Amalei ben Azai, what's the difference if he's sitting at home or if he's on a trip? Rabbi Kiva responded, the one that's sitting at home, it's possible for him to have heard. The one that on the trip, it's impossible for him to have heard. So he's going to be exempt. Bezdin lakar es kol aguf. Bezdin says that this entire mitzvah doesn't exist. Amru, for example, they said, Ein nida b'Torah. There's no law of nida in the Torah. Ein Shabbos b'Torah. There's no law of Shabbos. Ein avodas chacham b'Torah. There's no problem worshiping idols. Harei lepeturim. This is not. They're exempt from the sacrifice because this is not what the pasuk was talking about when it said that if there's a mistake, they have to bring a sacrifice. Let's say the mistake was just in the details of the mitzvah. He said you don't have to follow in a detail of it, but you do have to follow the other details. And that's exactly the case. We are this halacha of this type of korban. It's called the par helam davar shel tzibur. The congregation or the Bezdin needs to bring the sacrifice. Ketzad, what's the case? Amr yesh nida b'Torah. Of course, there's loss of nida in the Torah. Aval abal shemer siyam keneged pater. But if someone lives with a woman when she's waiting that one day to see if she's going to see again, when during the days of Ziva, he's supposed to wait one day, they said, don't worry about the waiting. You don't have to wait that day. So then, in other words, she can go to the mikvah already and they can have relations. Or let's say the Bezdin says, Yesh Shabbos b'Torah, of course there's laws of Shabbos. But taking out from private domain to a public domain, that's exempt. That's not a problem. That's like nishkaferla. So it's okay. A little reform.
Carry.
Carrying, it's from inside to outside. Maybe the halachas of carrying are only outside, where it's difficult or something. Right. Remember someone saying, I don't want to say his name, trying not to talk Lashon Hara lately. But he was a radio show person. He was a Jewish guy. He says he felt that it's more Shabbostic to go in his car and to listen to classical music, walk on the streets and hear the trucks beeping. So that's what he did. Anyway, like such a type of thing. It's not Shabbos. Shabbos exists, but he came up with some theory. Okay, there is a concept of avodas kechavim, but pater. But bowing down is not a problem. Bowing down is acceptable. So they came up with something. This is exactly the case where they have to bring that par helam davar. The matter was concealed, but not the entire law. It was just one matter of the law. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav. This is the most common expression in Shas, 5-word expression. Rav Yehuda, most common. My time of the Reb Shimon. What's the reason for Reb Shimon that says that the individual that didn't hear that the Besdin retracted is still going to be exempt? The explanation is because he was doing it with the permission of Besdin and he didn't hear that they retracted. Those that say it's a very difficult line to translate. Reb Shimon says that any psak that comes out for the entire congregation, if an individual does it, he's going to be exempt because the psak was to make a distinction between a mistake and on purpose. All right, there's different interpretations what that means. Meisvei. The Gemara has a question. Parhelm davar shel tzibur sirav etzchavim betchila gayben alayim divrei Reb Shimon. They collect from the people. How do they bring the sacrifice? They go around to the congregation and they say, we need everyone to sponsor some money because we have to bring a sacrifice because the Besdin made a mistake. So they're going around doing a collection. And Rabbi Yehuda, that's the words of Reb Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer Mitchumas Leshkein Ban. Rabbi Yehuda says no, it comes from the temple fund. Amai, so the question is why? Given the Gavala Havalei Haida. 1 second. If they made a collection, then this person definitely knows that the Besdin retracted. Why is he considered innocent if he already paid money for the carbon? Maybe we can say against Stam. They didn't say exactly which psak was why they're collecting for. So he knew that they're collecting. So he didn't know what it was. He just gave him his credit card and charged the card. Oh, for the Besdin, just charge the card. He didn't listen. Maybe he wasn't even in town, so he never paid. Rav holds, this is Rabbi Yehuda Rav holds like the other opinion. That's the Tanya Epcha that was thought the opposite. Originally they would collect from the people. The Rabbi Yehuda, it's Reb Shimon, the one that says he's exempt. And why would he be exempt? Because the collection's not done from the people. The sacrifice is brought from the community funds. Tani, starting a brayser, Reb Meir, Reb Chayev, Reb Shimon Peter, Reb Elazar Mersafek, Misham Sumchus Amritali. Talking about where the individual, after the Besdin retracted, an individual still followed through. And we're talking about over here, Reb Meir says that he's chayiv to bring a carbon. Reb Shimon says he's exempt. Reb Elazar says that it's a doubt. And in the name of Sumchus, they said that it's tolei. It's hanging. The difference between Reb Elazar and Sumchus is if you have to bring an asham tali. According to Reb Elazar, you do have to bring an asham tali. According to Sumchus, you don't. Reb Zeira says, Mashal Reb Elazar. I'll give you an example of what Reb Elazar is saying. Person ate a piece of fat. It's a doubt if it's chelav or shuman. And then he finds out maybe asham that he has to bring an asham tali. Maybe he sinned. Not only according to the opinion that says that the community is one that brings the sacrifice, the mefarsim and milsa, that over there everyone knows because it's the community that's bringing the sacrifice, so it's much more well known. But even according to the opinion that says that it's Besdin that brings the sacrifice, milsa, that the matter is not known because it's not all over the town. But if he would have asked, still is a slight amount of guilt. Why he didn't know, he didn't ask. He didn't turn on his radio. Apparently, you have to keep your radio on for to hear if the Bezdin retracted from their verdicts. Or no, it can't be that they have to keep the radio on. It must be. You should have hung out in the mikveh longer to hear the news. Amber alert. Amber alert. Right. They should have asked. If he would have asked, they would have told them. Am Rabbi Yossi bar Rav and Mitem Rabbi Yossi bar Zvi the mashal the sumchas l'madavar. Sumchas that says he's exempt. Why should it be exempt? L'adam shevi kaprasi ben hashmash safek b'yom niskarpelay safek meshachashech niskarpelay. But if it's been hashmashas by twilight, it's a question if he brought the sacrifice at the right time. So it's a doubt. Shei maybe Hashem Tali. You don't bring an Hashem Tali based on that. Blame me by Lamandamar best and maybe and blame Farsim, not only according to the opinion that says that's the best and that brings the sacrifice, that it's not known to the congregation, but even according to the opinion that says that it's the community that brings the sacrifice, so that everyone knows that they're best and retracted. And they would have told them, but here, if it's a doubt, if it's day or doubt if it's night, we don't have anyone to ask. This is like asking, like, what does the appendix do? Like, no, we don't have any answer to that. So there wouldn't be any Hashem Tali here. Okay. Go a drop further. Let's go a little further. Let's see. What's the difference? Ben Azai says to Rabbi Akiva, what's the difference? He's sitting at home, or if he went on a trip. Rabbi Akiva said if he was on a trip, then we're going to say he's exempt. Rabbi Akiva responded well, that if he's on a trip, he doesn't know what the Bezdin said.
Right.
So Amar Rava says that they're not talking about when he's on the trip. Talking about when he was about to go on a trip. The Ben Azai Chayev, the Bebesis. Ben Azai says he's Chayev because he's still at home. Rabbi Akiva Potter because when you start packing, you're already like in a different world, and he doesn't hear the news of what's going on. And the Mishnah we learned that Rabbi Akiva would agree if he's on a trip that he's going to be exempt from bringing the sacrifice because he didn't have to hear that the Bezdin had retracted. So Ben Azai says, what's the difference if he's on a trip? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva responded, if he's on a trip, he can't hear. He didn't know what the Bezdin said. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva answered well to Ben Azai. What was Ben Azai thinking? So the Gemara adjusted and says that he wasn't actually on the trip. He was just about to go on the trip. And that's machlokes. If about to go on the trip makes you exempt from but it says a machlokes if he's chayav or pater. We're following in the opinion that says he's pater. Rabbi Akiva was explaining. Oh, the Gemara was suggesting that Rabbi Akiva gave a good answer. So what was Ben Azai thinking? The Gemara explains the scenario that they wasn't talking about when they were already on a trip. It was before they left. The Mishnah discussed if the Bezdin takes away the entire law. It says Benelam Davar. The matter was concealed from the eyes of the congregation, which is referring to the Bezdin. We learned before that Davar means that it's only a part of it. Mitzvah kula. Not if they uprooted the entire mitzvah. Ketzad. Give me an example of this. The Brisa continues. It says, Amru, if the Bezdin Paskin, ain't neither b'Torah. There's no such law of neither in the Torah. Ain't Shabbos b'Torah. Ain't Avodas Chum b'Torah. And then the congregation violates the law based on what the Bezdin said. Yachal Yochayavin. Maybe they should be chayav. Talmud Laimar, Benelam Davar. It says no, only if the matter was concealed, and this is not only a Bleitzid Sal Mitzvah Kula, not if the entire mitzvah was concealed. And here, the entire mitzvah was uprooted. Therefore, Hariel Peturim. Aval Amru. But if they said Yishnim B'Torah V'Labal Shmersim K'Negedim Pater, there is a law of Nida in Torah, but not on that one day that she's waiting to see if she's going to see again. Yesh Shabbos B'Torah. This Shabbos in the Torah. Aval Ametzim Rishas Yachal Rishas Ram Mispater. But they said that if someone carries from a private domain to a public domain, is pater. Yesh Avid Scham B'Torah. There's a law of Avid of idolatry. But someone that bows, that's not a problem. Yachal Yiptur, maybe over here they should be pater. They shouldn't have to bring the sacrifice. Talmud Laimar, Benelam Dav Lekol Guf. This is exactly where they're going to be chayav if they forget this law, but not the entire law. Okay, now Amar Mar. Mara says we go back to analyze the brisa. Yachal Yipturim. The Brisa said that maybe they should be exempt when they only try to uproot a detail of the mitzvah. Does it want to say that if they uprooted a little bit and they kept a little bit, they should be pater? However, how could you say that? Bakir's called guf pturim, and they're pater also from if they uproot the entire law. So b'may chayav, and then when should they be chayav? What did you mean, Yachal Yipturim? The Tanya Hachik Kakashale. Rather, the Gemara says that the Brisa, the author of the Brisa, had the following question: Ema Davar Kula Milsa Mashma. Maybe we were learning that Davar means the matter, a part of it. Maybe it means the entire thing. Talmud Laimar V'Nelam Davar. So the Brisa says V'Nelam Davar, and somehow V'Nelam means only part of it. How does V'Nelam only mean part of it? Yes, mixas davar. Maybe it's because it's the extra word. My mashma. How do we see that this means only part of it? Amarula karibei v'nela midavar was concealed from it. Okay, that's how it from it. Maybe get the mem.
Part of it.
I'm not sure. Chizkiya says, Amar Kra, Basu Achas Mikol Mitzvahs, and they did one of the mitzvahs. It sounds like an entire mitzvah. No, it says it Mikol from the mitzvahs, because it says from, like Kol mitzvahs, and not an entire one.
Right.
Mitzvah starti mashma. The Gemara says, 1 second. Mitzvahs is a plural. So maybe it is an entire one, just not all of it. Nachman bar Yitzchak mitzvahs ksiv. It doesn't say mitzvahs with 2 vavs. It says mitzvahs with 1 vav, and therefore it's from one of the mitzvahs. It means only a portion of the mitzvah. Ravashi says Yalef davar davar zaken mamre. Zaken mamre. We learn davar davar from zaken mamre. Ksiv be zaken mamre. Behind the zaken mamre it says ki palim davar. It says if the matter is concealed from you, so you have to go to the best din. And in a small, you can't stray from the best into the right or to the left. And what does it say over there? Leisasim in a davar. Mamre min a davar. Like called davar. Just like when it comes to the zaken mamre, it has to be in a detail. It can't be in an entire mitzvah. Af bahira. Also, when it comes to this part, halam davar shall see, but this karban. Davar v'loi kalaguf. It can't be something an entire mitzvah. Let's leave it over here. Rav Yehuda Shmuel. Continue tomorrow. Okay. Have a good week.